যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. We have today back with us for the third time Miss Rami Niranjan Desai. Thank you, ma'am, for joining our live stream.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to come back on your show.
Ma'am, is there any way to increase your volume? Can you put the mic a little closer?
Better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak
Yeah.
louder.
Yeah, this is better. So, ma'am, we won't really rehash the issue here. We are going to discuss free speech, whether it's important according to you, and Ranveer Allahabadia issue. Would you care to start with an opening statement, your thoughts on the matter and the situation as it is now?
You know, it's been obviously a situation that's taken over the imagination of the country, but it wouldn't have if there wasn't this sort of backlash in terms of legal backlash. Now, I think some people have chosen to say that free speech is absolute, and they're free speech absolutist, which is fine. Some people have found the comments made on that show distasteful. I am one of them. But I also feel that free speech anywhere in the world has its limitations. Of course, I don't agree with the fact that a country needs to go this far. Governments need to go this far, wherein they need to act upon the kind of they need to act upon the kind of FIRs that have been made against these kids, and I call them kids because they're fairly young.
Yeah.
I also feel that that you can't ruin somebody's life, which technically it will be, because they decided to say something that was fundamentally crass. So, of course, you can take this side, you can take that side, but I have mixed feelings about this. I think in today's day and age of social media and the kind of dissemination of information, I think there has to be a certain amount of contextual understanding of the situation that you're in, not because you don't want to say something or you're scared of saying something, but because of the backlash that you may get. So I think that is pretty much what I feel about it.
Okay. Ma'am, like I told you on WhatsApp as well, I believe Ranveer should not have apologized anyway. Apologized to begin with, and he should have used his elevated position in society to finally show the state, and this is the choice of metaphor here, the proverbial finger to the state. And then he could have led the fight from the front, and the arguments we are giving in favor of free speech, we would have given anyway, but he would be in the front leading the charge. So he apologized, got nothing out of it, and free speech is getting screwed anyway.
Look, you have to look at it from multiple points of view. Of course, it would be an ideal world where you could have free speech limitlessly. But that's not the kind of world you live in, whether it's just in terms of the societies that we live in, but also in terms of the legal frameworks that we live in, the constitutional frameworks that we live in. There are limitations. Even in India, free speech is not absolute. Of course, you have the right to express, you have the right to have opinions without the fear of censorship, you have the right to criticize, you have the right to have opinions. But how far can you push it is finally determined by the society that you live in. It's determined by uh, what the constitution looks at to in terms of other rights. Reasonable restrictions can be placed on the right to protect, let's say, the security of the state, national security, public order, but it also includes decency, morality, so on and so forth. So that is the context that you live in. Now, of course, Ranveer is just one of the examples. You can take this example with anybody. You're a podcaster, you can say, yeah, he should have fought for uh, the right to what he said. But the fact of the matter is, there are two aspects to this. One is how much liability the person is willing to take themselves. Um, what he said, in my opinion, is undoubtedly crass. I don't think I could ever say it publicly. I could ever think of it, or I would find it
Yeah.
funny if I was sitting in the audience. I
Yeah.
thought it was humorless. Uh, to find out that that is not even your pretend humor is, to me, absolutely a betrayal of your commitment to your craft. So I don't know what is his commitment. Are you a podcaster just for the sake of being a podcaster, and therefore it has nothing to do with free speech? Of course, there are people like yourselves, and I'm not making a value judgment here. I am just using this as an example. There are
Yeah.
people like going out of your way to defend him, but you come from my point of view and I say you're defending somebody who himself is not really committed to the craft, let alone
Yeah.
the craft is espouses to teach, which is open conversations, or free flow of opinions or ideas or thoughts, so on and so forth, not limiting to the particular channel that we are talking about. He's brought on all sorts of other people on his show. I would expect somebody to be more invested in this, but I don't think he is in. And again, I'm not saying this. I'm not making a personal accusation on him. But if people have expectations that he should be the voice of freedom of absolute speech, then he's not giving me the right signals that he's the right person. I think nowadays podcasting is also treated more like business than it is treated like a flow of ideas. So I
Yeah.
doubt he was going to do that. I think the primary concern right now would have been um, public perception, uh, business model,
Yeah.
and the harm to reputation. These have been predominantly prominent on their minds. And I think that obviously makes it problematic, not for us, but makes it problematic for this entire world of podcasting or social media exchanges, or whatever you may want to call them. So I think, yes, while it might be great for us to say that there should be absolute freedom of speech, really, it's not, that whole idea isn't constitutionally supported. Therefore, it is legally supported.
Yeah.
And say that to say that certain podcasters, because they have had a backlash to what they've said, should
Yeah.
become sort of freedom fighters. I don't
Yeah.
think the longer majority of the people are in it for the reasons that these things became popular. I think they are in it largely because of the business model of it.
Okay, ma'am. Whether his joke was a joke or not, or whether it was crass or not, whether it was good or bad, is that even a factor? Because let's say his joke was actually good, and let's say actually 20% people found it funny. Would the state, who actually has decided to go against him, regardless of any basis, pretty much at this point, because even his editors are getting FIRs in their names. So would we have sat in a situation where his joke was found funny, and then we would have requested that no, see, at least the joke is funny, don't arrest him? Would the state have listened in that situation?
Of course not. The state would not have listened. And uh, if
Right.
FIRs have been filed, like I said, the
Hmm.
FIRs have been filed on him or have been filed, sadly, on his colleagues who probably had nothing to do with this except lift it off and give it to him from another show.
Hmm.
Maybe that might be their only involvement in this situation. I think it's
Hmm.
very sad that the state should go after them. The state going after anybody who is not really a hardened criminal or
Hmm.
who has really really done much apart from offend senses or been crass or distasteful. I think
Hmm.
that's a very big price to pay, because when the state comes after you, there is real fear. And
Yes.
young lives to live in that fear or to be impacted by it, which more often than not people would be for a long time to come, is, I think, very unfortunate and sets a really bad precedence. Because what do you think is going to happen next? People are going to feel emboldened to take offense to anything. I
Hmm.
don't think that would be the case. However,
Hmm.
when we talk about, when we talk about, if we were to talk about this legally, if we
Hmm.
were to talk about this, not that I'm an expert, but from what I understand, if we were to talk about this constitutionally, um, sure, we all know Article 9. Sure, this uh, it gives us this freedom to be able to write anything, print anything, say anything. But again, you have to understand that the fact that this can become a legal problem is because, again, this is not absolute. And while you are on social media, while you are on a public platform, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the circumstances, you have to keep it at the back of your head that this could be problematic. It
Hmm.
allows governments, or our government, to frame laws to impose reasonable restrictions. The right is not absolute, and it's really just subject to the limitations and restrictions that are bound by our particular societal context.
Hmm.
If you look at the section 2 of Article 19, you'll find the stated reasonable restrictions to Article 19. So it'll tell you what you can, or what are the limitations of freedom of speech. And let me tell you, decency and morality are two of them.
Hmm.
So apart from public order, or it shouldn't infringe on other rights, or it shouldn't harm national security, so on and so forth, decency and morality is a part of the second section of it. So I think it has to be, in a way, we are living in a world, we are living in a society where a lot of things that are said
Hmm.
have implications, of course. And I'm not saying that uh, one shouldn't be able to take this. One shouldn't be able to take criticism, or one shouldn't be able to take something that is not necessarily in line with your point of view. And I agree with people when they say morality, or uh, what is decency, can be subjective.
Yeah.
While that in mind, it really just boils down to the point: are we looking at this situation legally? Are we looking at this situation from the framework of what our society is and expects? Both can be argued either way, but I think the important part here, and which is important to me, is how far can we take being offended? I can be offended. I can, I can turn around and say, I'm not going to subscribe to his channel. I am
Hmm.
going to leave his channel. But am I going to go out of my way to file an FIR? Certainly not. And
Right.
I don't think anybody should be doing that. So
Hmm.
when you're talking about, again, see, these kind of the split personality that we live in.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, we are all trying to find our way through it. So if
Yeah.
I find it distasteful, I find it
Hmm.
objectionable, I actually do believe in certain uh, ideas and frameworks and theories that talk about speech, your thought becoming speech and speech becoming action. So I do believe that we have to be responsible for what we say. It's like saying, it's okay for somebody to come on TV, being an Indian citizen on, an Indian show, and saying that, oh, पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर नहीं है, ये इंडिया ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर है, या कश्मीर को आज़ादी देनी चाहिए. Where do we stop it? या chickens neck काट देना चाहिए. You know, what is then, where do we limit it? Then we can allow everybody to say whatever. But I
Hmm.
think offense also has its limitations.
Hmm.
And I would tackle this situation by saying, I don't want to listen to him. I think it's really crass. I think, uh, he needs to make up his own jokes. At least
Hmm.
don't get into trouble, repeating other people's jokes. I
Yeah.
think you are not being committed to your craft.
Hmm.
Therefore, it makes you look, it doesn't make you look genuine. But hey, that's your life. You bear the brunt of it. I am not going to take action regarding this. My only action is going to be, maybe I'm not going to watch you. I have some people who've been on his show and
Okay.
said, I'm offended to the level where I am going to ask them to delete my video.
Hmm.
People say this also. Fair enough.
Hmm.
That you're taking personal action.
Yeah.
So I think everything has its limitations, like freedom of speech has its limitation, so does taking offense.
Hmm. Ma'am, I have two questions regarding the point you just brought up. One is, do the legal frameworks really matter here? Because we know the state only follows some laws and doesn't enforce a lot of other laws. The only reason that Samay Raina and Ranveer Elabadia today are facing harassment is because they don't have 100 guys behind them waiting to do dharna and blocking traffic and doing anshan, etc. Otherwise, every government would have listened to their demands,
Look, I think the only reason that they are in trouble is because they have the kind of big viewership that they do.
which is
Chota
not ready to
viewing,
hit the streets.
which obviously, who's going to hit the streets for them?
Yeah.
People don't even move for even graver situations.
Isn't the
Um,
prerequisite for legality here only people hitting the streets and not really what are the laws?
See, like I said, I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm not a legal expert. This is my
Yeah.
understanding of the laws. But
Hmm.
look, laws anywhere in the world can be used as and when authorities please for them to be. Unfortunately, that's kind of the world that we live in. Um, I remember something that enraged me quite a bit was, do you remember during the times of CAA, the anybody who'd read the CAA knew that it had nothing to do with citizens of India, right?
Yeah.
Yet we had people left, right, and center blatantly lying.
Hmm.
Foreign correspondents sitting in
Yeah.
Delhi, enjoying South Delhi's social settings and hospitality, saying, and I still remember this. This was this was in a British newspaper, and this lady consistently writes against India, living in India, and she'd
Hmm.
written, not only will it bringing in the CA, not only will it harm um, the Muslim population in India, but it will particularly harm the female portion of the Muslim population because
Hmm.
they, comparatively to male Muslims, have less paperwork. I couldn't believe this was written and it was published, and that nobody had slapped an FIR against her for really spreading,
Right.
nonsense. And this was live.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means you're a journalist. You
Yeah.
are supposed to have this responsibility, but if the state was to clamp down upon you,
Hmm.
it would be, oh, our freedom of expression and our freedom of speech is being stifled in this country, and therefore it was not done.
Yeah.
But when it's this is the problem, when it's somebody like this, when it's a Western journalist, we are, unfortunately, and this has nothing to do with this day and age. I think this
Hmm.
has been a consistent problem with us. We
Hmm.
don't want to look regressive in front of them.
Yeah.
But when it comes to somebody who is of Indian descent in India, we don't mind saying that, oh, yeah, let's go after them because what they've said is offensive. For me, saying something like what they did, spreading rumors and creating
Hmm.
in it, resulting in conflict and the loss of lives, is far more heinous a crime
Yeah.
than somebody saying something that is absolutely gross and distasteful and not his own.
Yeah.
But that still is far more dangerous than this is. Also,
Hmm.
I think what we then need to also look at is everybody applauded that joke.
Hmm.
So there is also a society or a segment of society, maybe, that is saying this stuff is funny.
Right.
That also then makes us question what is this changing world, what is this changing society that we are living in? Because on one hand, we are highly offended. On the other hand, there is the next generation that is clapping their hands. Are
Hmm.
we going to arrest them also?
Hmm.
So I think this arrest and FIR and these people having to run away or go into hiding is absolutely unnecessary. I think
Hmm.
the state could have done a lot more without really um, going after these people like this and setting a precedence that may come
Right.
back to bite.
Exactly. Uh, Ma'am, what is the problem with allowing complete free speech except just the call for violence?
See, I think, and again, this is something that again can be debated because, like I said, morality or ethics, none of this is absolute. That itself is
Yeah.
subjective. But
Yes.
every country, therefore, every society decides to live by certain rules and regulations of boundaries. They may be loose to a certain extent, but
Hmm.
they are there, which is dependent on generally the emotional and the ethical makeup of the society.
Hmm.
Like the Constitution itself. The Constitution is not just a bunch of do's and don'ts and laws. The Constitution itself is an ethical representation of what our particular society is. Therefore, as it may sound as archaic or old that it does, the argument towards that would be that while freedom of speech and expression is vital and it's a protected right, um, it also involves the safeguarding of other people's rights and interests. And it ensures that there is a balance, so you have a balance that sort of ensures that the exercise of freedom of expression does not undermine or infringe other rights of individuals. Now, how are
Yeah.
these rights of one individual and another individual decided? Rights itself or offense and defense itself is based on how your society has evolved. Therefore, even the constitution, keeps evolving ever so often, right? Uh, with amendments that are brought in. Um, so I think if you look at India in that sense, morality in India is influenced by the constitution, society, religion, personal values, and therefore it brings to us what is constitutional morality as well. Now, the constitution, many will argue, should be this, should be that. But the fact of the matter is, it is a moral document in India which reflects the shared values of our society. Now, what those values of our society are, um, in my opinion, are they're fairly instinctual. What are we ready for? What are we not ready for? But um, that morality, in my opinion, apart from certain areas, will also change over a period of time. What was
Right.
okay 100 years ago
Yeah.
is not okay. Why 100 years ago? What was okay 20 years ago? When I was growing up, there were certain things
Yeah.
I, as a girl, could not do, which
Yeah.
when I look at women today, it's absolutely liberating for me to look at them because I feel that they can do so much more and must have been so much more starker
Hmm.
um, when the constitution was made, the changes.
Hmm.
So I think I think that is what it is that, it's constitutional morality that guides the actions of a government and therefore the actions of a citizen. And that is where, we circle back. So, like I said right at the beginning, that we can talk about, laws and what governs these laws, and what
Yeah.
is constitutional morality, and what is the action that the state should have taken or not should have, shouldn't have taken.
Hmm.
On the other hand, we can talk about us being fairly young and a part of modern society in India. Where do we see all of this going? How far can it go, and how has it changed? So these are two, separate sort of conversational factors in this case.
Right. Right. Ma'am, I have two sort of adjacent questions here. One
Please.
is the classic question: who decides, and how do we even gauge society's morality or the public morality that the constitution is based on, and whose rights were really harmed with these jokes? Is there any right to not get offended or not listen to bad jokes, especially a joke that was behind a paywall? And besides, in terms of gauging morality, the audience that was there, they are also part of that public on whose morality the constitution is supposed to operate on. What about their representation then? Because they found it
Absolutely.
funny.
Absolutely, they found it funny. Lots of people found it, maybe if not funny, they had no opinion on it.
Or even us, who didn't find it funny but are opposed to whatever's happening with them. What about our morality representation in the constitution?
Absolutely. Therefore, it is a, evolving. I assume it is an evolving document, and therefore, it these kind of debates are great to have because it
Hmm.
makes us learn at the same time. I
Hmm.
don't think India has encountered the kind of changes that we are seeing it encounter any time before. I think we really, and I feel it a lot because when you were growing up in the 2000s,
Hmm.
as opposed to this decade,
Hmm.
the difference on just personal liberties, and I'm not talking legally
Yeah.
or whatever,
Hmm.
society wise, has
Yeah.
changed enormously. So,
Yeah.
who is to say that it's not going to change, in another 10 years, even more? So, it's one of those things, whenever I look at these people who, in the name of religion or who, in the name of morality or culture, which is so loosely used, go around harassing young couples on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ludicrous. I think they should be arrested. No
Yeah.
organizations, groups of people should be
Hmm.
allowed to intimidate people in their private spaces, or even if they're in public spaces, people choosing to spend time with each other.
Yeah.
Um, so this sort of, I think, if any action of ours in the state clamping down on people, in this case that we are talking about, is going to encourage people like this, then we really need to reassess
Hmm.
what are we doing. Um,
Yeah.
So I think there'll always be human life. There'll always be some amount of uh, some amount of unfairness. There's never going to be a utopian society. There's never going to be a entirely fair, 100% fair society. Life is not going to be fair. So there are going to be times when certain people's rights are going to be infringed, because of other people, and vice versa. This is
Hmm.
something we have to accept. We are never going to be able to perfect it.
Hmm.
But, um, if we are to, as a society, if we are to get so emotional, and it's like, today, on a slightly different note, I don't know if you saw my recent tweet on the chair of the Munich security
Yeah.
conference.
Yes. Yeah.
He's howling, and he's, for God's
Yeah.
sake, it's because somebody criticized you. Sure, it was
Yeah.
Vance who criticized me, but you're crying because Vance criticized you. Are you serious?
Yeah.
And you are going to lead a conference on security. I mean, to me, so so that is this sort of, you don't want to become this hypersensitive as a society, because that
Right.
itself has its own drawbacks. So
Right.
when Nietzsche Nietzsche said that Christianity's virtues become
Ma'am, what? Ma'am, I have 3, 4 questions on exactly this topic on Nietzsche only and how he criticized Christian morality. I thought I would have to ask you beforehand that whether you like Nietzsche or not.
no,
This is such a big coincidence.
Nietzsche was
This
wrong about a hell of a lot of things. This is not one of them that he was wrong about.
I have about 4 or 5 questions relating to that. Okay, then go ahead, make this point. I'll ask the questions, those questions now only.
So basically, Nietzsche had, had often blamed Christianity for making virtues out of vices, and talking about empathy and pity and offense and so on and so forth. He actually, he actually said that, this was, I think he used the word subdued herd or something like that. So basically,
Hmm.
like sick people, sick herd of animals,
Slave
uh,
morality.
slave, yeah, exactly, slave mentality, uh, and that was being preferred more than, the Superman, the Ubermenschen,
Hmm.
so for him, um, you can't, you can't be so soft, you can't,
Yeah.
uh, you can't make empathy out of, or gain empathy out of everything, that oh my god, I'm offended, I'm so upset. How far is it going to go? This is the same stuff that we even saw in the US unfold. Of course, it was a different political, uh, uh, a different political side, wherein the left was consistently upset no matter what you did. Whether
Hmm.
it was because of gender fluidity, so on and so forth. Everything that you said or did made them upset, and
Hmm.
it came to a point where people like us were asking, so I don't have the right to offend, but I don't even know when I'm offending you because you're going to be
Yeah.
upset anyway. And that
Yeah.
makes us walk on eggshells and therefore
Yes.
create a society that's not real. Um, you know, um, it's one of those things where, and this, this is what Nietzsche said actually can go, if you look at it, it can go either way. It can go the way of the people who are attacking these boys, saying, because it can say that, look, you have to live in the real world and you can't be so hypersensitive. But it can go for the people who are also defending um, these boys. The reason being that this active sympathy, um, for what is considered maybe weak or ill constituted or considered fringe or whatever, the active sympathy also can become into toxic sympathy. I think it was today Elon Musk, he'd taken out a great post on toxic empathy, I think. He'd taken out
Hmm.
a great, tweeted a great post, and that was Nietzsche as well,
Hmm.
where he talks about, just being overtly empathetic also is problematic. So when
Hmm.
we talk about Nietzsche's idea of, better men, the supermen, a
Hmm.
better society, we have to look at this idea of active sympathy or toxic empathy from both ends. I think even if those defending these boys in this case take it too far, it becomes a case of active sympathy. Because I think one also has to realize that if they have gotten into trouble, um, they have gotten into trouble knowing the kind of sensitivities that uh, surround them. Uh, and again, there is no value judgment here. It's not a question about right or wrong. I'm just talking about over sympathizing or over empathizing. And the other side, if they are so enraged by what they've said, I really think they need to not be so enraged. They, of course, can be offended and they can be upset and they can grumble about it. But I don't think they can take it so far. So Nietzsche's theory falls in both categories.
Hmm.
But of course, he was talking about, he was talking about Christian morality there. And
Yeah.
let me tell you, while he was talking about Christian morality, a lot of ideas of freedom of speech also come to us from the West. They come to
Hmm.
us post World War II, where
Hmm.
on one hand you had you know communism, and the other hand you had the World War II, post World War II world. So
Yeah.
that itself created this idea of free speech and discussions
Hmm.
on are there limitations or not. So that itself largely has come here because of that idea.
Hmm. Now, ma'am, I need to ask you: is the Constitution at all an evolving document? Because the law is the same. Our morality is evolving, like you said, from the times we were growing up, or you were growing up, to the times of now. But the law is exactly the same. What Nehru had made. So where is the
No,
evolution then?
absolutely. There are maybe, in the cases of morality or outraging morality or whatever, maybe there isn't that kind of change or that kind of attention that it has deserved. I don't even think anybody knows how to gauge it.
Hmm.
There might be other parts of it which have been consistently, changed, or they have had elements of amendments in it.
Hmm.
But there is absolutely no doubt that if the Constitution is a document that reflects morality, then it also needs to change.
Hmm.
If not change, it also needs to evolve to encompass, the changing mindset. That
Right.
is going to be a difficult thing. It's not going to be an easy thing. Remember that when we talk about situations like this, and of course, there are many caveats attached to this. When we talk about cases like this, you and me are sitting in urban cities and talking about it. Our
Hmm.
morality may not even be the same
Yeah.
as the morality of somebody in a small town and the majority
Yes.
of the country. So,
Yeah.
what does the Constitution then reflect? Should it reflect you and me, who consider ourselves modern and
Hmm.
who consider ourselves, rule breakers or uh, evolving human beings? Or should it reflect the majority of the population that also obviously is evolving, but at a different rate, in different with different factors and in a different context to us, making certain ideas poles opposite.
Yeah.
So we
But
must.
ma'am,
uh,
yeah, yeah, go on.
No, I think that's what we need to consider.
Okay.
That when we talk about this and these debates happen, if we
Yeah.
were to go into a village somewhere in any
Hmm.
state, it doesn't even have to be a remote village, most people would
Yeah.
not even have heard of this debate.
Exactly. Ma'am, that is actually my point. Why do we need to care about their views? Because that so-called majority who needs subsidies and freebies to breathe, to survive, to pee for everything, how is that majority going around taking a membership in Samarana's channel? They haven't even heard the joke. How are they offended? So why bother about their morality?
Correct, it's a good argument, but eventually the constitution is made for the entire country. So there have to be some common values that it is reflecting. It's now not just made for you, or it's not just made for me. So I think, and this is what I can come up with in my
Yeah.
limited
Yeah.
understanding of constitution. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any legal
Hmm.
background.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would expect that to be the reason that it has to reflect the majority of the population, or at least the general ethos of the majority of the population, than a
Hmm.
minority of the population like you and me. And
Right.
of course, I'm not, again, like I'm saying, that I'm very against these arrests. I'm very
Hmm.
against any sort of state hounding of these people.
Hmm.
But um, this, uh, my understanding is not necessarily a defense. It is actually
Right.
grappling with what is the truth.
Yeah.
We want an ideal society wherein people can see things from our lens, but
Hmm.
necessarily there isn't one lens, there are multiple lenses.
Exactly. Yeah.
So uh, I think that's what we have to constantly measure, and we have to measure it. In my opinion, no law, no rule, as much as we respect it, can be absolutely right in all cases.
Hmm.
So there has to be a case by case understanding of, what is the offense here, what should be an
Yeah.
appropriate reaction to this. It's not like
Yeah.
one who fits all. like we said, when it comes to national security, somebody, if they're going to sit in India and threaten cutting off the chicken's neck, I think he
Yeah.
should be thrown in the dungeons, let alone the jail.
That's a
Um,
call for violence, essentially.
that's
I
a
see no
call for
problem with that.
absolutely. But then again, when it can also be argued when you are talking about incestuous things like this, when you're talking about dark situations like this, how can one argue? Again, I'm being the devil's advocate. How can
Yeah.
one argue that that will not incite somebody uh,
Hmm.
to look at things that way, and especially when there are young people watching, and it doesn't matter if they are, slightly over 18 years of age or whatever. But how do we know that that isn't encouraging them? That can be the counter argument to that.
Well, to be Ranveer's free for hire lawyer here, he was asking a question to an audience member. He was not even saying that we should do incest. He was posing a question.
Correct, correct. But just the scenario that is in
Hmm.
is something that we must also understand that majority of this country, it is unimaginable for them. Of course, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we are all doodh ka dhula and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Sure, we are not. I'm
Hmm.
very cognizant of that fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, for some people, this is taking a moral high ground. Like
Yeah.
I said, it should have been left. Eventually, it should have been left to the fact that it's in bad taste. I don't want to watch it. I don't subscribe to these views. I'm not going to
Yeah.
watch him again. If really somebody wanted to make an impact, there would be a mass exodus from his channel,
Right.
right?
Which, by the way, is not going to happen. If people just as a mark of protest even stop copying his thumbnails, even that would tell you something, which is not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Also, I think if you look at it strategically, this might be a bad game plan. This might be a bad move because
Hmm.
it probably will get him a lot more sympathy. And
Yeah.
therefore, it may even encourage people to keep pushing moral boundaries further and further on. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know what the agenda is. What do you think by putting them into jail is going to get you? Is it going to deter young people? No,
Hmm.
by my own experience of when I was young,
Hmm.
you rebel against what you think are restrictions, and there might, on the other hand, there might be a complete backlash wherein people think that this is how you break the barriers of virtue signaling.
Yeah. Ma'am, I'll now get to the Nietzsche questions, and I have written it down, so I'll just read out my questions only. Firstly, is do you like Nietzsche?
I mean, like I said, he's been wrong on most things, but yeah, I just like the idea of a lot of philosophers, a lot of thinkers, at a certain point of time, especially turn of the century, that actually did this as a profession. I think that's
Hmm.
what I enjoy far more than,
Hmm.
the Spinozas or the Nietzsches or whatever. Like if you read Rousseau, you
Hmm.
know, I mean, it's amazing, completely irrelevant stuff.
Hmm.
He was so idealistic that it was
Yeah.
almost like none of this is actually ever going to happen. But the
Yeah.
fact that you can live in that idealism, the fact that you
Yeah.
can want this,
Yeah.
one primitive, pure man, um,
Yeah.
in the sense of the human race, I think is exceptional. And I don't think we have the time to do this kind of thinking any longer.
Yeah. No, hopefully someday. So, ma'am, now will be a long question. It has 2 3 parts. Take them one by one if you want, or I can repeat them later on after completing the entire sentence. So, firstly, do you see some semblance between today's Hindu society and the Christian obsession with victimhood? Is Hindu society now completely Christianized and goes on celebrating mediocrity as an extension of its prioritization of egalitarianism, and therefore cannot make room for excellence? And we see this in with reservations, freebies, everything. Is Hindu society as a whole the Jesus Christ who died for our sins, and now we must therefore atone for our sins and repent by arresting comedians, celebrating reservations, doing wealth redistribution, and staying away from that quote unquote Western style capitalism?
Well, that's a big question for sure. But is Hindu society exactly like Christian society? I don't think so. I don't think it's like Christian society. I do think that we have Western lenses, which are Christian morality backed lenses that we have discussed on your show also multiple times. It's the way we look at us, the way we look at diversity, it's the way we look at society, it's the way we look at civilization, it's the way we look at modernization. Um, none of none of the meanings of any of these terminologies are our own. They are all taken from the idealistic worldview of the Christian West.
Yeah.
Sure, we have abysmally failed at correcting these lenses. Even today, we do not have any respect for expertise. I know zero respect. कोई भी किसी भी चीज के बारे में बोलता है, कभी भी बोलता है, कहीं भी बोलता है, पढ़ता नहीं है. I can bet on you, I can bet on the fact that a lot of the books that are best selling, everybody has bought it to
Yeah.
put it on their Instagrams.
Yes,
Nobody
yes,
is just
absolutely.
page end to page end. We are
Yeah, yeah.
See, even this case is an example of not being true to your craft over and above anything else. And after that, there have been a huge amount of snippets that have come out that this was not the only isolated case where words were lifted off from somebody else, again from the West, lifted from somebody else in order to look cool, in order to be funny. Um, this is the case in every career, every profession that there is, that nobody seems to really be committed. So when you ask me a question like a Nietzsche or a Rousseau or Voltaire or Spinoza or whatever, these people lived, all of them didn't come from aristocratic families where they had money to, money to spend their lives thinking about these things. A lot
Yeah.
of people lived in abject poverty thinking and writing about these things because that was it drove them crazy. Whether it was artists, whether it was writers, whether it was philosophers, thinkers, because that is the kind of passion that they had. Again, I'm not saying everybody was like that, but they certainly had
Yeah.
more people who needed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in our country, we want to be that. We don't want to make the effort. We don't have the work ethics to do so. And if somebody does, it does not have, they will not have the society supporting them. Some of the
Yeah.
greatest Sanskrit scholars have to go to Western countries to get jobs there because there aren't even jobs available here for them. And they
Yeah.
thrive. The same with people trying to, let's say, even people trying to figure out ancient scripts like the Indus Valley script.
Yeah.
Um, there are real scholars who've been doing their work apart from their day job, who we've never heard of, who only people like us, maybe who are in the ecosystem, will come across. There are even people who are security experts who don't have money to go to hospitals or get medical treatment, wherein some of us will come together and we will pay for their treatments, even though they're brilliant. Because we have, the amount of space that has been taken up by untalented people, basis, but it's true. They're really
Yeah.
not talented,
Yeah.
basis the fact that either वो किसी कोटा में आ गए हैं,
Yes.
या तो वो किसी को जानते थे,
Yeah.
या तो they can afford it.
Yeah.
And I will still say this, that some very, very brilliant people who have gone abroad, done well from India, have done well because they're brilliant, and the West has been able to give them scholarships and give them space to study. In India, brilliant people may have a chance if you're second to brilliant, which are a lot of other people, have zero chance in this country. And if you're a mediocre person, you can forget about it.
Right.
So I'm just saying we have a lot of deficits. I don't think it's entirely Christian morality that has taken over us. I also think we behave like the have nots because we have been made to feel that we are the have nots, and therefore we have
Right.
become a very insular society. We
Hmm.
are unwilling to help each other out. That is why the left will always be stronger than the right. Whatever this binary is, understand it the way you want to understand it, but I speak of it in a very generic sense.
Yeah.
The ecosystem that dominated our academia, that dominated our society, that dominated the upper crust of India, will continue to do so because the right wing, which is rooted or supposed to be rooted in certain amount of civilizational unity, in
Hmm.
uh, a certain amount of moral, religious sort of value systems,
Hmm.
is able to go beyond their own individualism. It
Hmm.
is me, my family, my immediate family, that too,
Hmm.
and about it. We are not
Yeah.
interested in. We are not interested in helping anybody. We are not interested in putting, putting people who really have talent in, as a focal point. We are not even as observers and viewers and readers interested in sifting through work to figure out who do we really like most. That is not just fed to us through social media, but who personally we really enjoy reading or listening to.
Yeah. Now, ma'am, Hindu texts in general or the history of ancient India is also used as a convenient toy for whoever is in power or whatever the current cool narrative is. Because from Arthashastra to any text, people of intellectuals of yesteryears always found Gandhian socialism in those texts for some reason. And today we have Chanakya, Arthashastra, and Abhijit Mitra saying that he was the sort of uncredited founder of Austrian economics. So we can assign to them anything we like. We will read them any way we like. So we can't even say that no ancient Indian text or ancient Indian society was like this. So I guess we'll just have to say that we have to get to more Greco-Roman thinking and not Christian morality thinking, because at least there's some consensus about what these terms mean.
Of course, I think history should be left in the archives. There is,
Hmm.
yes, history has value. We must know our own history. Of course, all of that I think we all agree with. Those are the general foundations of us understanding our civilization. But beyond
Hmm.
that, history has its limitations.
Hmm.
Now, if history is going to be your point of reference,
Yeah.
then we are in big trouble because the
Yeah.
context that that situation happened in, or that person said that in, or that person did something in, is within that context which does not apply any longer.
Hmm.
So, oh, how are we evolving then? So, I think too much of weightage to history being your reference point to today's issues and today's world is extremely problematic. So, I don't think
Hmm.
that should be the case. I think
Right.
history should be read for the value of exactly what it is, which is history. I
Hmm.
think what we really need to start understanding, and we need to really start doing the real work now. We have had 10 years of a different dispensation, which has allowed us the space to talk about talk about elements of civilization, society, and religion that we could not address previously.
Hmm. Right.
Um, and when I say we could not address previously, I think
Yeah.
you will agree that this was a time when people who came from a differing point of view could not be published, would not,
Yeah.
nobody would have their books, did not get space in newspapers, could not write articles, and forget about being invited anywhere, which would be an
Hmm.
intellectual platform. So
Yeah.
sure, we have had, now a decade of that freedom. But
Yeah.
what are we doing with that freedom instead of just talking about it? So I think
Right.
really the meat of the matter is in getting real, not talking about what happened in history and abhi tak, we are colonized and this and that.
Hmm.
We had
Hmm.
enough to stop being colonized, mentally
Right.
colonized at least. I think now is the
Yeah.
time to do real work, which is to start understanding society from an insider's perspective instead of an outsider's perspective, which, as you said, Christian morality point of view or a Christian
Hmm.
lens, or a Western Christian lens, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
to start understanding society from the inside, to start looking at cases like this,
Hmm.
cases of this what is it called? What was the latent show? Was it?
Yeah. India's got latent.
India's got latent. So
Yeah.
India's got latent sort of show situations, looking at it and really trying to have healthy debates, which throws more light on the fact that our society is changing. How is it changing? What, is it? And we might not find the answers, but the idea of this sort of thought process is not to find an absolute answer, is to be
Hmm.
able to argue one way or another. And that's the joy of it, that you can even argue. So I think
Hmm.
the questions we need to start thinking about: where's our civilization going? What is morality to us today? Are we living in an India where, this sort of moral diversity still exists? Are we living in an India where either we are accepting this diversity or we are creating fault lines within this diversity?
Hmm.
Are your and my views the same as anybody else's views? These are questions that we have to be at least engaging in, and only through that churn will we start understanding ourselves to a higher degree. I don't think we understand ourselves right now. That is why we have this deficit of restraint in any action. And what I mean by
Right.
deficit of restraint in any action is either we are going hammer and tongs after people
Yeah.
or not doing anything.
Yeah.
That comes out of the lack of understanding of who we really are.
Yeah. And when people think that we have to find out who we really are, they start with learning a few shlokas of Gita, not
Exactly.
really
And
finding them.
exactly. It's the same thing as you could be Bible thumping, but
Yeah.
you could be indulging in the most immoral things. We know the church and hundreds of cases of pedophilia. You
Yeah.
could be indulging in that. And again, here I'm not saying
Hmm.
this sweeping statement, but there have been so many cases and they've been well
Yes.
reported.
Yeah.
And they have been more often than not missionaries, Bible thumping
Yeah.
evangelists,
Yeah.
um, if not other denominations as well. But
Hmm.
it could be that it couldn't change your morality. I don't think if you know 5 shloks, if you know 10 shloks, that is an
Hmm.
indication of the person you are, the morality that you have, or the
Hmm.
values that you represent. On the
Hmm.
contrary, I really think it's important to have a certain amount of free space of in an environment where you can speak your mind, where you don't fear being unduly judged. Look,
Hmm.
if the kind of statements that were made in, let's say, a family setting like mine, and we are very
Hmm.
progressive people, my
Hmm.
mother would have thrown him lock, stock, and barrel outside the house,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
um, but when we are talking about situations like this, I'd rather you say it and I take offense to it and I say, okay, I don't want to watch you any longer. Then
Yeah.
you don't say it. You pretend to be somebody greatly virtuous, and for
Yes.
me to clap for you and say, oh, what an amazing guy. I
Right.
think hypocrisy in society is far more dangerous
Hmm.
than any other vice. Because
Yes.
hypocrisy makes you into fraudulent people, making you into a fraudulent community, making you into a fraudulent society, leading to nothing.
Yeah. Like people say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Now, ma'am, does the current dispensation deserve credit for allowing free speech of leftists, and both right wing and left wing is kind of publishing with their own ways, or is it a case of that since system unka hai and we are in a transition phase, so therefore they are having to allow leftists the space? Because judging from their actions on comedians, probably 10-20 years down the line they are going to do the same to leftists as the Congress did to right wingers.
Who's going to do? Sorry, the last part was
Yeah.
who.
Judging from the actions of today's dispensation on the comedians, maybe 20-30 years down the line, when there are no system unka hai excuses, they will do the same to leftist intellectuals what Congress used to do to right wing intellectuals.
Look, I think again we are grappling with this idea where we want to be people who have owned up to our culture, who are
Hmm.
finally being stakeholders to our civilizational history, our great diversity, our culture. Um, we want to be those people, but there'll
Hmm.
always be this fringe element that will take it
Hmm.
too far. It's the people who will clamp down on Valentine's
Yeah.
Day celebrations, who will say, "Arey ladkiyon ko chote kapde nahi pehnne chahiye," or like I'm a great victim of the statement, ki, "Why are you not married?" Nobody thinks this is a very personal question to ask, and maybe you don't know me well enough not to ask. I have random people asking me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this kind of stuff is, it's something that I think, while it's a transition period, like you said, while
Right.
we want to be stakeholders and we want to be proud of the culture that we were not allowed to be proud of, the fringe element will take it that far, where
Yeah.
people like me, who I think, I obviously am progressive and I'm modern in the Western sense as well,
Yeah.
but I think my cultural foundations are very strong. Even people like me will find it very offensive. So now, do I judge my entire ecosystem and my entire society, uh, my entire country basis the fringe element? No, I would still like to believe, for the sake of hope and idealism, that that is a fringe, that does not reflect. I mean, I know so many people, including not just women, but including men like myself, men and women who are somewhere also grappling this on a personal level, where they're modern and they want to do things what looks like you're a part of modern society, but they are conservative in the sense of what their religious beliefs are, or what their way of life is, and they don't quite know where they fit. So
Yeah.
there it becomes a society in transition, because you have the extreme liberal, you have the extreme conservative, and then you have this generation which has elements of both.
Yeah.
I'm not politically speaking here, I'm more speaking in the sense of culture and society, which have elements of both, and they don't know where they fit. Do they fit here? Do they fit there? Or do they fit nowhere and they are the third element? So I really think that is what we are going through, and the government is a reflection of that. The government is an amalgamation of everybody who is proud of their ancestry, who is proud of their
Yeah.
history. But there are certain people, even within the government, who don't understand that there are parts of this country that are changing, that
Yeah.
morality or morality or society are not stagnant elements to this world, that they are ever evolving, ever changing, and we need to understand that. So there is that fringe element also. But then on the other hand, there are really progressive people as well. But coming to situations like this, I think more often than not, we have been too easy on the real culprits of, whether it's the media, whether it's I don't know, whether it's the left wing influencers. We've allowed them to peddle lies to the extent of damaging internal security of this country and the international
Yes.
image of this country.
Yes.
I don't think any left or right comes in that. That just, you
Yeah.
need to clamp down on that. And I think it's high time. This is one of
Yeah.
the reasons I have to say I am quite enjoying Trump 2.0.
Exactly.
He's come in with a bang. People
Yeah.
can keep saying, "Oh, he treats India like this. Oh, he is not really, he's unpredictable." I don't care about that. I'm looking at it from one point of view, which is, he's come in with renewed confidence. He knows this is his last term. He knows that he is going to settle scores and right the wrongs that have been allowed to continue for too long, and that um, there are certain value systems that are also priority for him. Even
Yeah.
in the US, what did he come and do? He said there are only going to be two genders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that necessarily may not. That's not an example I'll take for India, because in India the third gender has always been well accepted in society. But
But
I
they are
think what
transsexuals. They are not transgenders. India's
correct,
third genders.
correct. Absolutely, I stand corrected. But the fact is that that's not like an equivalence. I'm just saying he's
Yeah.
doing what he thinks is
Yeah.
right
Yeah. Yeah.
for his country, and he's
Yeah.
doing it without apology, without fear and without backlash, to
Hmm.
the point only yesterday I was watching the ratings, and his ratings have never been as high as they
Yes.
have been right now. So
Yeah.
I think that's a page. I don't think our government needs to take a page out of anywhere, but I think that's a page I would take out of that learning, wherein
Yeah.
people in power can make these kind of decisions without the fear of public reprimand or repercussion, because I think if you're honest to what you're doing, people will appreciate you.
Hmm. Okay, now, ma'am, three more questions to go. Two on this topic and one on Myanmar and Bangladesh, just because of public demand, because you are an
Yes.
expert on that as well. Uh,
Bit of all of this. I'm
yeah.
not in Bangladesh just for the sake of it. Okay.
So, ma'am, do you like Bahubali the movie? Bahubali 1, 2?
Uh, sure. I don't know.
I'm
What's the question?
Yeah, because anytime someone says that we are taking too many of our ideas from the West or we follow the West too much, I get a little concerned, because I, being a rock and metal musician,
Huh.
like Western music a lot. Whereas Bahubali, which draws heavily from Japanese anime, Lion King, Hamlet, and then puts it in an Indian adaptation setting. So,
Hmm.
does someone deserve extra credit for being inspired from further Eastern countries and not Western countries? Or Bahubali is a perfect example where it's Indian pride being promoted, or talked about, but it's inspired from Shakespeare, Lion King, Disney, and as well as anime, Japanese anime.
Look, I don't think when you're talking about the arts, and I'm hardly a very artistic person, so I'm not the greatest person to pass opinion on this, but I don't think anybody
Hmm.
deserves any special merit because they've taken from the East. I think this East
Hmm.
versus West sort of binary is too limited when it comes to the arts.
Hmm.
Yes, I do think that there is great amount of disservice if you're lifting off from
Hmm.
anywhere. You can be inspired, and if there isn't inspiration,
Hmm.
how do you indulge in the arts? You have to be
Hmm.
inspired from somebody or something or some technique or something around you. So I think inspiration is fine. It doesn't matter whether it's West or the East. But of
Hmm.
course, if one was to look at it from the other point of view, that has the East been ignored in the kind of artistic value that it brings on the world platform? Yes, it has been. I think,
Hmm.
yeah, of course, the Japanese arts and the Japanese movies were very well
Yeah.
known about, the great writers, the great uh, directors. I'm sure there are so many more in other smaller countries in Southeast Asia or so on and so forth.
Right.
Haven't heard about. But that might just be a deficit of publicity or the barriers of language. English being the
Hmm.
largest language,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
look to side. We were educated. So I don't think we should look at the arts in East versus the West. But yes,
Hmm.
should we know more about Eastern arts? If you are really interested in the arts, yes, you should know about Eastern arts, because I
Hmm.
think there is a whole gamut of unexplored potential
Hmm.
at that end. Now, Bahubali being
Hmm.
obviously a very famous movie or whatever, but I wouldn't
Hmm.
really be able to comment on Bahubali itself because I
Hmm.
watched it end to end. I have perhaps
Okay.
only watched one of the movie. I think there are many. There are two or
Two.
three. Two. So
Two.
I've perhaps only watched one, that also piecemeal. But what
Okay.
was impressive to me is
Hmm.
that we can bring what would have looked pretty much fair and correct in terms of representation of ancient India. We
Yes.
did a pretty good job in bringing that to life, because
Right.
maybe it was the lack of technique or the lack of pro- production know-how that
Hmm.
earlier on it used to be. I mean, it was really bad. Like you could tell it was cardboard at the back. The
Yes.
person,
Yes. Yeah.
it wasn't really real. The clothes
Hmm.
that they wore, and I think TV serials that replicate historical dramas have done us a great
Oh my
disservice,
God.
because God knows that looks like a circus. It just looks like
Yeah.
kapra pen ke aaye ho, like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no costume, nothing. So I
Yeah.
think getting closer to because we have the tools now, being able to bring in elements, bring in influences, bring in the know-how, and as well as the technology, apart from inspiration, and create something that helps you relate your story better is, I
Yeah.
think, should be applauded, and I think it
Right.
should be encouraged.
Right. And ma'am, before going to the second last question, just asking you for fun sake, have you watched Lion King and have you read Hamlet?
Um, I have not watched The Lion King, and I
Okay.
remember Hamlet as an O level student having
Okay.
to study. And we had to do some strange stuff. We had to obviously do the whole Shakespeare, one or two of those,
Hmm.
but we had to do Chaucer and
Okay.
Canterbury Tales and things like that as
I
well. So I
see.
remember bits and pieces.
I
My
see.
favorite, if you were to ask me,
Hmm.
was actually 19th century literature.
Okay.
So I really, really enjoyed. I really, really enjoyed Jane Austen. Again, great novels. People say, oh my God, it was only about like plush society and so on. So no, it was
Hmm.
a reflection. Books were a reflection of the morality and values of Victorian era British society. So
Yeah.
therefore, you read between the lines. I was really, really fond of Edgar Allan Poe. I was really, so for me, uh, uh, 19th century was far more exciting. So if you were to
Right.
ask me what happened in Chaucer or one of the
Hmm.
other books, I probably won't even remember.
Yeah. But those of you who have seen Bahubali, do watch Lion King. It's basically an adaptation of Lion King and Hamlet. Okay. Someone is asking, you studied in, sorry?
I didn't know this.
Yeah. She someone is saying, damn, she studied in UK. You studied in King's College University, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, ma'am. Second last question is, what is the source of morals in a society?
It's religion. Mostly, it's where it starts from is um, the moral code that religion gives you, and I wouldn't say faith or spirituality because it actually is what is codified, what you
Hmm.
should do, what you shouldn't do, and
Hmm.
every religion, including Hinduism, to a
Hmm.
certain degree, has certain do's and don'ts. Now,
Hmm.
whether they are applicable to today's day and age is up for you know heavy debate because a
Yeah.
lot of it wouldn't. But
Right.
I think the source of morality is religion.
Where does religion get its morality from, or religious people, or the people in authority in religions, bureaucrats in religions get their morality from?
See, look, religion, of course, these are very interesting questions and questions to be pondered over. But religion, by most accounts, morality has, number one, come from the gods,
Hmm.
and the messengers have relayed it to society. The
Hmm.
prophets have relayed it to society.
Hmm.
Once that their prophets have relayed it to society, then it is codified,
Right.
and that becomes your source of morality, virtue, and vice. But of course, um, there'll be uh, there'll be religions or new religions, or we used to call them new religions actually in
Hmm. Hmm.
anthropology of religion,
Hmm.
religions like Scientology, which will come
Hmm.
up with its own frameworks, which might
Yes.
look very different to what traditional religious systems look like.
Yeah.
However, they will also have a cult leader. They will also have a
Right.
prophet, messiah of sorts. So
Exactly.
there will always be a figurehead that will
Hmm.
impart all this knowledge. Of
Hmm.
course, adding to that codification is also the evolution of society.
Hmm.
What is the not the evolution of society in the context of a changing world. So for example, a morality would have been different to the people who followed Sanatan Dharma
Hmm.
till their environment changed with the advent of invasions, colonizations, and other moralities.
Right.
Like,
Ma'am, would it? Yeah. Yeah. Go on.
for example, like many would say that covering your face wasn't really natural to India.
Yeah.
We not expected to cover our faces. Um, Maybe at the most the head, but
Hmm.
not our faces. If you look at a lot of specifically northern areas
Hmm.
where there was Islamic influence, you will see that the Mungat is an irreplaceable part of their society and what a good moral woman should be like.
Exactly. Yes.
So I think this sort of when you ask this question, it's a really interesting question. I think it has all these factors in it. It can come from a prophet, it can come from the leadership, it can come from a messiah, it can come from God itself. But over a period of time, the exterior influences that impact that same society will have changes in its idea of morality and values.
Exactly. Right. Which is why, ma'am, this is a bit of a follow up question. That would it be fair to say, therefore, that morality just comes from whatever was convenience a few years back and has now been codified into law to help society function better, and conveniences which were based on negative rights, not positive rights, and not going around harming people, which leads to a stable society, and that just goes on to get codified into law. And people in the religious authorities say that, see, this is what is leading to a great society, so why don't you follow it anyway? Make it a rule that you have to behave this way.
I think some of it does. Some of it comes like that. I think some of it comes with what the understanding of what the society is prepared for and what it isn't.
Hmm.
Um, for example, um, a highly educated society, maybe
Hmm.
this is, it has all sorts of other problems to it as well. So nothing again is absolute. But let's
Hmm.
say a highly aware society, aware of social media, or aware of the drawbacks of social media and uh, podcasts or influencers
Hmm.
will know that this is the drawback of it. So therefore, will take what is said with a pinch of salt. It is like
Hmm.
it's like uh, it's like the prophets in roaming around in Punjab nowadays, right? The
Hmm.
missionary prophets. They call
Hmm.
themselves prophets. They're not even missionaries any longer.
Hmm.
And what is the famous one? Bajinder,
Yeah.
Prophet Bajinder. So,
Hmm.
people like Prophet Bajinder. Oh, there's so many like him. Now, on Instagram the other day, I caught my maid um, trying to send money because they said, oh, if you contribute even a little bit, and it could be only 10 rupees or 50 rupees,
Hmm.
it'll solve some money problems, or within 5 days, something would come back to you. Obviously, this further, manipulates people into getting trapped in this whole conversion scam as well.
Yeah.
So, so if you look at it, if it was a aware society or a more educated, uh, largely educated society who understood the pitfalls of new modes of communication, they would be able to tell the difference.
Hmm.
But I think it is, whether we like it or not, I think it also somehow becomes the state's job to try to understand what the society is ready for and what it isn't. Because there might be people or societies that are not ready for this sort of onslaught of things and may
Yeah.
not be able to take it with a pinch of salt or not be able to rationalize
Right.
it.
Yeah.
However, even though uh, the, the state feels the need to sort of somehow balance this, I think the balance has to be very minimal. I think eventually people have to understand for themselves what is right, what is wrong, what is going to get them into trouble, what isn't going to get them into trouble. And that I think becomes incumbent on society. So I think
Hmm.
government contribution to this sort of dialogue, while it needs to be there piecemeal, needs to be there case by case, and needs to be there in the most safest, minimal way that you can afford it to be.
Right. Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
Last question. Yeah. Yeah. Go on.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, okay. Last question. What's going on with Manipur? Not as a news reporter, but where do you think it's going, and Bangladesh as well?
Manipur is at a state of relative peace. Um, Insurgency related or any sort of disturbances are
Hmm.
at an all time low, the lowest that they've ever been since
Hmm.
the conflict had started. it is not in a situation of conflict right now.
Okay.
So while there are a lot of fear mongers and a lot of people who made careers out of
Hmm.
talking about Manipur half-heartedly, the fact of
Hmm.
the matter is that the government has been able to bring down the conflict in record time. And by conflict, I mean conflict resulting into incidents. I
Hmm.
don't mean that problems that came out of the conflict have been resolved. So, for example, the buffer zone may still be there. Um, Cookies will not go to Methi areas, Methis will not go to cookie areas. I think that
Okay.
is a very, very sad situation for any part of our country to be, because there should be the liberty for our citizens to be able to go anywhere they want to, especially people of Manipur should not have restrictions because community leadership has decided you cannot come here and you cannot go there. I think that
Right.
is really manipulating fault lines in a society which really what it needs right now is some amount of healing. So I hope this sort of buffer zone and this sort of segregation ends really soon. So that hasn't ended.
Hmm.
Extortion has gone up because obviously whenever there is conflict, whenever there is a lack of jobs, whenever there is unemployment because of a conflict, um,
Yeah.
areas like these, which have had groups operate there very extensively for a very long time and have funded themselves by one of the means being extortion, will come back to that. So, therefore, extortion is a problem there right now. Having said
Okay.
that, it still is a commendable that the conflict related incidents, killings,
Hmm.
murders, that has come down. And when I say they brought it down in record times, is because when you look at the previous conflicts, it had taken them 8, 8, 9, 9 years to bring it
Hmm.
down. So I hope
Yeah.
this peace pays and this peace paves the way for some sort of prolonged understanding of communities that live in Manipur. Number two, the
Hmm.
greatest development that has happened in the last month or so has been really the resignation of the chief minister.
Hmm.
Um, I think well and good because a lot of people had asked for it. There was a certain
Hmm.
amount of deficit of trust by certain quarters. Remember
Okay.
that he also had a lot of support. So,
Okay.
it goes both ways. But that
Hmm.
resignation has happened, which actually empowers the state to now take really, really formidable action against culprits and the perpetrators of this violence.
Right. And the future of Bangladesh? Where do you see it
Oh,
going?
God, it really is. I mean, it's I don't even know how it's come to this, because I really think the future is at this point, from the position that we are at, very, very bleak. I think um, I think the government obviously is in shambles, unable to control anything, but they are still not in shambles enough to be ousted. Mohammed
Hmm.
Yunus has come out to be a really, really stubborn and possibly egotistical man who, irrespective of the doldrums that his country is in, where he promised to bring in peace and democracy, is now deploying that same peace and democracy for, maybe he's saying that it might take 4 years more, 6 years more. So I think he has not just failed his country and his people, but he's also failed his masters who are sitting in the West, who themselves have failed. So it's a
Right.
whole set of failures. But having said that, I think the future is bleak, because if this continues, reversal of the situation will be nearly impossible. By this, I mean to say that there is enough ISI, enough Pakistani influence already in Bangladesh. There have
Hmm.
been senior level meetings, DG to DG meetings, military to military meetings. We already got the inkling that they are up to no good when they removed customs checks from the cargoes that were coming in from Pakistan. We know that there is also talks of joint production of arms, and God knows what other talks are in place. We know that Jamaat is taking up a lot of place in
Hmm.
the political discourse as well unfortunately at the social discourse, diluting the secular foundation of Bangladesh to a point where it's unrecognizable.
Yeah.
BNP is in disarray, so I think the cadre and the party is trying to do what it can to keep itself afloat. Therefore, operating in the rural areas, a lot of the violence has been apparently, allegedly perpetrated by them as well,
Hmm.
because they also feel that they are losing that ground to the Jamaat.
Hmm.
And all, Bangladesh has moved towards, that 20% slightly pro-Pakistan,
Yeah.
anti-war population that used to be there in Bangladesh,
Yeah.
unfortunately has become the major stakeholder. My
Yes.
fear is that if it's too late, will Awami League cadre have the courage and feel safe enough to fight elections? Will we ever be in a position where Sheikh Hasina can go back safely to Bangladesh? These are
Hmm.
questions that make me feel that the future is bleak. And as we know, that once a country is in the grip of Islamists, to turn it the other way around is nearly impossible. And that will
Right.
have great repercussions, not just on Bangladesh and its secular fiber, but also on India.
Right. Any scenario in which India sends boots on the ground in Bangladesh?
I don't think India will send boots on the ground. I
Okay.
think I think what necessarily can happen is now with the Trump administration in place and their focus being on internal matters and cleaning up their internal issues as opposed to international matters, with
Hmm.
the money running out, we have
Yeah.
all heard about USAID and
Yeah.
the money coming in. Something that we had talked about multiple times. You and me had also spoken about this, that
Hmm.
it is evident, and it was evident a year
Yeah.
and a half before Sheikh Hasina's ouster, that an ouster or regime change or a flip of parties was going to happen. And
Hmm.
that's something that now is a little bit shaky because money's run out, support has run out. Trump pretty much passed on the question to Prime Minister Modi, saying he'll answer it, he'll take care of it. I think what India can do right now is two things. One is it can really go all out and push for international outrage against the fact that the Muhammad Yunus led interim illegal government, because they're not democratically elected. We don't
Yeah.
know who has put them together. Illegal
Yeah.
government not allowing elections to happen,
Hmm.
and therefore call for international outrage backed by the US and all the other countries that we have great diplomatic relations with. We
Hmm.
can push for elections. And number two, we can support parties, whether it's BNP, whether it's Awami League, we can support these parties into being able to fight these elections. Anything but Jamaat. And I
Right.
think not worry about whether the BNP comes into power, whether Awami League comes into power. I think we need to push for elections. I think we need to bring democracy back in terms of it being hugely important to us because it's in our neighborhood and meets our boundaries,
Hmm.
international boundaries. Therefore, we are stakeholders in what has happened in Bangladesh. So I think these are the two things we can do. I don't think putting boots on the ground will really help us. I don't think India
Okay.
necessarily will do that. But
Okay.
third thing, I think it's important to keep a humanitarian outreach open. Remember Sri
Okay.
Lanka. We supported Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was going the other way, and we supported Sri
Hmm.
Lanka during the economic downturn.
Yeah.
We are reaping the benefits of that. So we must never
Hmm.
undermine people to people connect and the value of humanitarian efforts.
Right. Thank you very much, ma'am. This has been probably our longest podcast, and this has been one of the best, most fruitful, and most constructive podcasts I've ever done from my channel. Thank you very
Oh
much,
my
ma'am.
God, that is a huge
Yes, ma'am.
compliment. Like I've told you, you are possibly one of my top three podcasters. I enjoy being on your podcast. So I really enjoyed it as
Thank you,
well.
ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. And before we go offline, I'd just like to give out some fun tidbits and trivia. Akhilesh Yadav's wife is on camera, having said that Game of Thrones is a really great series which promotes incest. Smriti Irani has also appreciated Game of Thrones, which promotes incest in the first season. And Ravi Kishan dot dot dot. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Good night. Thank you, guys.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে একলা চলো